Welcome to Brave Together podcast, an empowering resource for the parents of children with disabilities, neurodivergence, and all unique needs.
In my own personal journey, I wish so much that someone had come alongside me in the beginning and said, there's so many opportunities available to you and supports for your child, but make sure as you pursue them, you're looking into your child being her best self, his best self. That's the goal, not so that they're more like whoever.
Hi, Bravies. It's me, Jessica Patay here, a fellow Brave mom, and I am the founder and director of We Are Brave Together, the nonprofit who has been serving and supporting moms since 2017. On this expert episode 230, Susanna Peace Lovell, Dr. Zoe Shaw, and I are so excited to welcome Heather Avis. She is the mother to 3 adopted children, including 2 with Down syndrome, and the author of the new children's book, I Like You So Much, Celebrating What Makes You, You. As a parent to children with Down syndrome, Heather has embraced the journey of adoption and advocacy, using her platform to highlight the intrinsic value of every individual. Through her work, including her podcast, The Lucky Few, Heather inspires others to recognize and celebrate the unique stories of families navigating the world of disabilities. Here is just a quick reminder to please join our free community at wearebravetogether.org. Also, please support our growth by rating and reviewing this podcast and sharing episodes that inspire you. And of course, check out our full episodes weekly on the We Are Brave Together YouTube channel. Now, please enjoy my conversation with the inspiring fountain of wisdom, Heather Avis. Let's begin. This is so great. This is our first time having Heather Avis on Brave Together podcast. I really can't actually believe that. And I was reflecting this morning, Heather, how in the middle of COVID, we did some sort of collaboration, I think, on your podcast, where one of our weekly Zooms, we sort of jumped into a podcast episode, and it was the details are foggy this morning, but that seems like 10 years ago.
A lifetime. I feel like a lifetime has happened in the last 5 years.
It literally has.
Right?
It literally has. Well, we are so happy to have you. Susanna, Zoe, and I are so glad to see you and be with you and talk about your new book. So for anyone who's out there who hasn't heard of you, which I'm sure it's rare, give our audience a little bit of your story, Heather. Tell us about your family.
Definitely. So I'm located in Southern California, and I'm married to my husband. We've been married, we'll celebrate 23 years this year. And I have 3 kids. My oldest is 17, Macy. She has Down syndrome. My middle, Truly, is 14, no disabilities. And my youngest, August, is 11 and also has Down syndrome. All 3 of my kids came to me through adoption and set me off down a path that I had never expected to go down, with being an advocate and an ally in the disability space, and, just radically changing my life forever and for the better, I say. And that opened up doors for me to get to talk to larger audiences through books that I write. And I host a podcast called The Lucky Few Podcast, similar to this one, it feels like, with 2 other moms who have kids with Down syndrome. And it's been a wild, awesome ride that I'm still very much on. That's my shortest version.
Yes, and we so appreciate your voice and advocacy. And I love that you call yourself a narrative shifter. What would you say? What's the number one way do you feel like to shift the narrative?
So I've been in this space, I feel like, as like an intentional advocate with disability and Down syndrome specifically for 17 years. And I honestly think the most powerful way to shift a narrative is to show up in a space. Like my kids with disability, people with disability, their life tells a story, like their existence. I always say, like, your existence is the resistance. We live in a world that has tried to separate and segregate and really like destroy people based on the fact that they have a disability. And just showing up and existing and refusing to be put into a separate space, I think, is a huge and important narrative shift.
Yes. I'm always curious about advocates or advocacy, especially as parents and then as children, because I know, you know, as parents, we've got a big job to do, right? And our kids just exist. And so I wonder how much, like how you walk that line between you being an advocate and teaching your children to also be advocates for themselves, but also not have to live their life in advocacy, if that makes sense. Like it's a big burden for children to take on as they're just trying to kind of learn to live. And so I feel like as parents, we've got to walk that line. And I'm just curious about how you walk it.
For sure. Like, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I not to project the fact that I believe in all this advocacy work on my kids. Like, you now have to do this too. You have to be a certain way in the world is a really unfair thing for anyone to have to hold, right? And I think that is where I've landed with just your existence being your own advocacy. Like, all you have to do is wake up every morning and be you. You don't have to do anything more or anything less. Just be who you are. And that's the lesson I hope all three of my kids can embrace, right? Like, walk out the front door and be who you are. And, you know, hopefully have prepared them as best as possible with knowing what they're walking into, like when we can prepare our kids. But I think it's something to be aware of. I think that self-awareness around it helps for our kids not to have the pressure, right? I mean, I think you all three could speak to this too. And it is interesting in the disability space, and I would love all of your opinions on this. I think it's really interesting when you talk about like self-advocacy, when we're talking about people with intellectual disabilities or not. And you hear a lot of this. I hear a lot of this in the autism space, right? It's such a spectrum. And I hear parents who are like, feel this need and have stepped into the role of advocating. And then you have autistic people who are speaking for themselves, right? As a parent speaking for your child versus your child speaking for themselves. It's something I think about often because my children do part of their disability. There are limitations in what they can and can't do, right? And how they can and can't stand up for themselves if they choose to or not. I would love your guys' thoughts on that idea of like parents as advocate versus our children as self-advocates.
That's a great question. I think for Ryan, and I can only speak for our story, is that he couldn't necessarily stand up for himself as an advocate. He is a deep soul and he's intuitive, but I don't know that he could really stand up for what he needs and what he wants in an articulate way, in an understandable way. Like I see through his behaviors that something is going on, that he's trying to communicate something. And he definitely, if something's not right with a team member at school, he can advocate, he can say something, but not probably fully advocate to what's needed. And so Ryan is not going to be, he's almost 22. He's not going to be somebody who is able to post or write and share his story. So I'll continue to share his story. I'll continue to share what the parenting journey is like, what the altered parenting journey is like. That's how I call it.
You know, for my daughter, Sullivan, similar to Ryan, she can't speak up for herself in that way. But I've talked to her about really what you're talking about, Heather, is just like being you, like being present, and demanding what I call just that, see me kind of thing. So my daughter said to me once, and this is why we don't have her in our current school system, she said that she came home and she told me, she said, they don't treat me like I'm human. And when she said that, of course it broke my heart that is how she's a smart girl and she has a lot of intellectual disabilities, but to be able to feel that and voice that to me. And so what I told her is, you keep showing up like you're human, right? Because you are. And you telling people that is you taking care of yourself, right? And that's you demonstrating your humanity by telling other people that. Talk to, the other teachers, of course, in her IEP, we spoke up about that. But I like what you said, Heather, about just you being and demanding space, right? That you deserve in the world is advocating for yourself. And that's the most that she can do in the present, is just keep showing up and saying, hey, I'm here and I'm human. I might not act like you. I might not look like you. I might not be able to do the same things that you can, but I'm here and I'm human.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I think it's an ongoing journey, especially as our kiddos grow up and age and be, more experiential in this world with these circumstances. I know that for me, my daughter Arizona is going to turn 19 in 2 days. And she attended a very, very sweet preschool, a therapeutic preschool, where they were really taught to express themselves. And Arizona always had, was a speaking girl, a verbal speaking girl, but it took her a while to be able to, put full thoughts together and be able to respond to questions and so on and so forth. Now I will say that she has learned advocacy so well in terms of being in touch with her own feelings, her own unmet needs, that it's almost it's almost a little bit like like over the top. I think Jessica and Zoe know so well, like, I'm feeling like I'm really uncomfortable in this moment. It's just like, it's almost like at every turn she's checking in, which, by the way, is beautiful and delicious. And we're in the line at Starbucks, and can we just place our order? So my work with advocacy with Arizona is just checking in. What is real and true for me right now? What is a real fear? What is a fake fear? What do I need to voice right now? What needs to be taken care of right now? Mommy, can we talk about this later? Right? And that's something that we have worked on together, and we continue to do literally every day, all day. But I am truly grateful for this space. I did not know that this was going to be available to me in terms of who my daughter is today. So it again, shifting and changing, and we'll see what happens post high school. I don't know what's next, right? So it's just an ongoing advocacy in the workplace, advocacy with peers, advocacy in however that's going to look, right? So thank you for that question.
For sure. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
So let's talk about your book, because I think, if all our kids heard from the time that they were born or from the time that a diagnosis was delivered, these words, and also what you said earlier, Heather, you matter. Resistance is your existence. You get to show up. If they heard those messages from the beginning, I think it would be incredible. I think it would be powerful. I was talking with a mom whose daughter is nonverbal, rare disease. And I said to her, do you say to your daughter every day, I know that you have thoughts and feelings and ideas and things that are going on inside of you that you want to express, that you have trouble expressing, but I see you and I know that you understand what's going, just the pouring in. It's just, yes, I do this all the time. And I think, wouldn't it be so powerful if we understood to do that with our kids, kind of like the phrase presume confidence that we hear really, and I feel like a lot in the autism world. But I think we can do that with all our kids who have struggles in any which way, shape, or form. Just that pouring into them from the beginning would be incredible.
Yeah, I feel like that with parents too. Like I know as soon as my child got a Down syndrome diagnosis, like from that second, you're inundated with all of the ways to help them, right? Like with early start teachers, you've got OT, PT, speech. There's just all these opportunities that are just, they just like come at you. And then the expectation is pursue it. And I remember when Macy, my oldest, was 5, I was at like a learning program for her, and the kids did their section and then the parents had a section. And the woman who was sharing, she had a son with Down syndrome, same age. And they were talking about like telling time or numbers, something with math. And she made a comment. She said, isn't that why we do all this? This being like showing up for these classes and being a part of this learning program so that our kids are more like their typical peers. And it was like a Oprah aha moment for me. And I don't remember the rest of that time, but it marked me. And I thought, no, that's not why I'm here. My goal is not for Macy to not have Down syndrome. She has Down syndrome. I love this about her. And from that moment forward, it really was this like check-in of why are we doing all these things? And the therapies aren't bad, right? All these supports that we have access to, they're not bad things. But for me, if my intention behind them was for her to be less Down syndrome, right? Or to be more like someone else, then that to me is like, wait a second, I'm off here. And so I think had someone from the beginning, instead of like, try all these things, do all these things, your kid can be okay. Don't worry, look at what everyone with Down syndrome can do. It's like, hold on a second. Couldn't we have just said, oh my gosh, you're going to be okay because you're going to love this child fiercely and they're going to love in return. And could that be our starting point? And then maybe, right, maybe they'll drive, maybe they'll go to school, like read, maybe they'll write, maybe they'll get married, maybe they'll go to college, but they maybe not. And what, like, how are we going to measure their value and worth? So in my own personal journey, I wish so much that someone had come alongside me in the beginning and said, there's so many opportunities available to you and supports for your child, but make sure as you pursue them, you're looking into your child being her best self, like your child being his best self.
Yes.
That's the goal, not so that they're more like whoever. Because I know for me, and I'm sure you guys are all nodding, that it becomes this treadmill and you're just like, well, wait a second. This kid over here was potty trained faster. What'd you do? Who'd you talk to? Who was your speech therapist? Oh my gosh, wait, my daughter can't tie her shoes. How does your kid tie his shoes? And you're just going on and on and on. And then it's like, I feel like a failure. And then I think, my poor kids, what have I projected onto them, even non-verbally, of like, be more, do more. It's like, no, you can just be you. And that's actually the best thing about you.
1,000%. I agree. 1,000%. I always say, your child's worth is not dependent on how well they're doing despite their diagnosis.
Right.
They have worth because they breathe. And say for parents, your worth is not dependent on how well your child is doing despite their diagnosis or wherever they land on the spectrum of their diagnosis. You have worth simply because you breathe. Like, that's what we should tell parents in the beginning, because otherwise they jump on the hamster wheel.
Yes.
I think of all of the messages that a new parent gets, that is the most important. That is the most important.
Yeah. And I agree with you, Heather. I also wish that was the messaging that I received, years and years ago. I so wish, all I heard was what we need to fix, and I'm sure that wasn't necessarily the language of the doctors and the developmental pediatricians and the professionals. I'm sure they weren't saying your kid is broken. They didn't say those words, but that's what I heard. And so when I read the title of your book, I Like You So Much, the first thing I did, Heather, was like, oh my gosh, Susanna, I like you so much. That is exactly the first thing I did. I was like, me first. And I wish that I had that. I do now. The mantra for myself, to also just be that model for my daughter. Susanna, I like you so much. I don't do that enough. And that in and of itself is immeasurable in terms of just how that will transfer to Arizona. And by the way, she loves the picture, color, story, children. I mean, she's almost 19. She is it is a beautiful visual, and I'm hoping you have more in store.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for saying that. And I love being a children's book author. I have this like sneaky agenda, knowing that every adult like behind it is an adult reading it, right? Like, and adults needing messages too. So I love that you said that, Susanna. That's
sneaky, not so sneaky.
Yeah.
I have a question. Sure. So our theme for our season is about mental health. And I think about this book being a way to pour into kids. And that what I call kind of like the in-betweeners, right? Not necessarily kids like Ryan who are so aware of their disability that they become depressed. I think there are kids and adults that are very aware of their differences. Ryan kind of operates in his little egocentric world. It's very PWS. I don't know if Sully's like that too, or she's more aware. But some of Ryan's peers with PWS, they're less cognitively impacted as Ryan, and they do become depressed because they're aware of their social struggles. They're aware of their isolation and their loneliness. How do you think books like this, Heather, can truly contribute to the mental health of kids and teens and young adults?
Yeah, it's interesting. I find that too in the Down syndrome space. I have a handful of friends who have Down syndrome that are, if they could change it about themselves, they would, and it's very, very few, but it still is like, ugh. And then one woman I know, she said, and my parents would change it too. And I'm like, this feels really layered and complicated. Like, I want to unpack this with you, but I don't know that it's disability specific. I think it's just being a human in the world today with a pressure to be more than who you are. And I'm not saying like work towards, I think it's for me, like work towards being your best self, but you've got to start with an understanding that there's goodness in you that just exists because you exist. And so as you exist in the world with a disability or not, like just know that to be true. And if you can't see it, I'm going to see it, and I'm going to name it and help you get there. You know, I think a lot of times when we're dealing with mental health, it's so important to have a come alongside, because you can get tunnel vision, right? Or things can get real blurry and it's hard to get out of there. So to have a tool like a book or a podcast or a person who loves you to come alongside and say, hey, I hear what you're saying. I see you and I'm with you. And if you can't believe this about you, I believe it and I'll claim it for you as we journey together towards this idea that, yeah, you are just good. Like there's just goodness in you, and you can't, like I talk about an intrinsic value and worth, that you can't do anything to take it away and you can't do anything to get more. It just is there. And I think if we start from there, it makes me feel like for me personally, my physical self is like a shoulders down, like an exhale. Like, okay, all right, we're not going to be flippant about it, and we're not going to be lazy about it. And it's not going to be like this tool that then we use to do nothing else in the world. Like, that's not what we're doing here. But having that foundation on which we can then step towards the next thing, step towards growth. And again, being our best self, not the best self that this self-help book over here says we should be.
I'm curious, Heather, about your journey with your podcast and the creation of The Lucky Few with your two mommy friends. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey and that process, and, so sort of what your intention is with your episodes?
Definitely. So I'm going to jump back a little bit and talk about the lucky few, the phrase, the lucky few. And when my oldest daughter, Macy, came home, this goes back to the beginning of our conversation about a narrative shift. We adopted her. We brought her home through adoption. So our diagnosis story is different than moms who got an in utero or at birth diagnosis story. Still, we didn't intend to adopt a child with Down syndrome. And there was a learning of a diagnosis that was unexpected to us. And there was this narrative all around us that was like, don't do that. And like, don't adopt a baby with Down syndrome. This is not a good thing. When we finally said yes to her, it was even like, we tell our family and friends and it'd be like, oh, okay. Not like a, yay, congratulations, you're getting a baby. And so it was such a conflicting, it happened very quickly in like a 3-week span. But in that 3 weeks, it was so hard to say yes to adopting her because of Down syndrome mostly. And then on the day she came home, I remember putting her down that night and looking at her little face, like holding her in my arms, right? She was like at 3 months old. She was 9 pounds, teeny little thing. And looking at her and going, I don't know what I was so afraid of. Like, what in the world? Look at this baby and I'm smitten and I love you. And I don't know what I was so afraid of. And then finding myself in the majority of places I went to, she's the only baby with Down syndrome, and feeling really proud of that and thinking like, no one else here gets this. Like, I get this, and feeling really lucky in that. And then understanding that, wait a second, nobody was telling me how lucky I was to have this child. And that's kind of where the phrase like the lucky few, because as I talk to other parents in the community and other people and people with Down syndrome, there's like a statistic that people with Down syndrome, like 97 or 98% are happy with their lives. Wouldn't change a thing. It's like so much higher than people without disability or without Down syndrome. And so I'm like, why are we not hearing this story? Like, I'm meeting so many people who love having a child with Down syndrome, people with Down syndrome who love having Down syndrome. We got to shift this narrative. So I started the phrase, the lucky few, as like a big narrative shift, and I talked to parents today who will say, we got a diagnosis, and then went and started Googling it, and the word lucky popped up. And I thought, what are you talking about? Like, who says they're lucky to have a child with Down syndrome? And then finding hope in that, like, but wait, there's people who feel lucky about this. So that was my big narrative shift. And so then the podcast started when a friend of mine who has a child with Down syndrome, who's same age as my son, my youngest, and she's like, hey, Heather, we should start a podcast. She said, I was trying to find something about like brushing my son's teeth, and there's just nothing out there. I'm like, let's do it. And then a good friend of mine who also had a daughter with Down syndrome, I'm like, let's invite Mercedes. So we just started as like a fun thing to do. We started in 2018. And then as the years have gone by and we've realized that we have a theme that comes up often, and we're real intentional about it now, that is this idea that we've been talking about of your kid with Down syndrome is really, really good, and you don't have to do more or be more, because we also are going to offer the tools, and we have experts on, and we have opportunity for learning and growth. But I have seen, as a person in the Down syndrome space, there's like a necessary pendulum swing from like doctors saying to parents, your child with Down syndrome will never talk. They will never know you. They will never, 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 never. And then parents are like, I'm sorry, let me prove otherwise. And it was important and necessary. And now we've swung so far over that you just, like I said earlier in our conversation, when you get a diagnosis, it's not like, congratulations, you're going to love this baby. This baby's going to love you. It's like, don't worry, your child with Down syndrome can go to college. They can drive a car. They can get married. Like, look at everything that they can do. And it's all, now their worth is attached to what their abilities are. And that, I believe is an equally harmful narrative. And we got to get back to where what matters, that like your child with Down syndrome is a human being worthy of life and love. So the podcast we really try to focus on that overall arching theme of your kid is so awesome. And if they do these great big things, let's tell those stories, because that's important. And the world does need to know that people with Down syndrome are capable of so much. And we're going to tell the story of the person with Down syndrome who is non-speaking and living with their parents still and under conservatorship, and, you know, like all those stories too, because that story is really important too. So that's what we try to do on the podcast. And we just have fun.
You have a great group, Heather. I really enjoy Micah and Mercedes, and thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for the podcast. Thank you for your voice and your heart and your honesty. It means everything. It really means everything. And you bring us back to what's important. Yes, we're going to do all the things for our kids and we're going to support them. But what matters is them, their heart, their soul, their humanness.
Yeah, thanks for saying that.
Well, why telling kids I like you is so powerful, maybe more powerful than I love you.
Yeah. I think when it comes to a mother and a child, or a parent and a child, the love is just a given. And you can think of maybe your own relationships with your parents or people who you know, or your parents' parents, that it's like, of course my mom loved me. Of course my dad loved me. But finding out the one time they found out they were proud of you, right? Like the one time in their life that they're like, my dad said he was proud of me for this thing. And just how powerful it is for us to hear from the people who matter to us so much, that we know love us. We take that for granted, right? Like it's just a given. For them to say, I like that you are this way. There's just a power and a weight to it that I think love is the ultimate, but to say I like you to our kids and to people in our lives, there's a power and a weight to it that's really important. And I think it can mark our kids too. And to say I like you because you're you, like to be really intentional about pointing out the things that your kids are doing, just that they're there. Like, I like sitting next to you. This is so great. I like being here with you. Pointing out things that they don't have to work harder to do, right? That it just already is who they are. I think gives people just like this opportunity to embrace who they are and to celebrate who they are in a way that is different than I love you, because I love you is such a given.
Yeah, I think it just hits different, doesn't it? You know, it feels very much like different. I'm actually taking a second to let you know that I'm noticing that I like you, right? I know. Right. I was just talking to someone yesterday about how she's like, my mom tells me like 20,000 times a day that I love you, but my dad never does. And, you know, and because it becomes this like sort of rote response sometimes, love ya, love you, right? But I can imagine if my parents today called me and said, you know what, Susanna, I like you. I think I would probably faint, right? But it would feel so like, wow, you see me, right? Okay, so that's beautiful.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It does hit differently.
Yeah, you see me, I like that.
I think we all want the people who love us to like us. And we all want the people that we love to like us. We don't think about that often, but we do. Yeah. And adult children, still sometimes seek that validation from parents. And it's about that concept of, I want you to like me. So that's so special. And I don't say that enough to my children. I like you. So thank you for that reminder.
Yeah. You're welcome.
What is another hope that you have for this book that you've just put out into the world?
Oh gosh, what is the hope? I think authors want their books to get into the world, but I really genuinely hope that this gets into the hands of so many parents of young children. And when I wrote it, it was like this challenge I gave myself to write a book that wasn't disability specific. I did that intentionally, but a book that all kids could see themselves in the story. And, there's lots of children's books out there that celebrate what you will be in the world, right? Like beautiful books that I love that a lot of kids can't see themselves in because maybe they don't have 10 fingers, 10 toes, or maybe they don't walk or they don't run, or they're not going to stand on a stage and sing, or they don't speak. So, but this book is for all the kids. It's not just that. So I really want, like what you said, Jessica, about wishing you had this book when your kids were littler. I want parents to have this as a tool and as a resource in kids and as a hope to be able to see that goodness and truth in their children and in themselves, and for kids to see that, have that instilled at such a young age. So my big hope for the book is that every child in the whole world gets it.
Well, we will definitely put it in our retreat bags. So
I was just thinking the same exact thing, Jessica, for sure.
Slam dunk. That's easy peasy.
I love that. Thank you.
Was there anything else that you want to share with our audience before you go, Heather? I want to honor your time, but gosh, we could just keep going. And there's so much that I want our audience to hear come from you. And I appreciate you.
Well, you're so sweet. This has been a great conversation. Thank you for having me. And you're doing it, audience, listeners. Look at you doing it today. Good job.
I love that.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Well, we wish you the best with this book and with all your endeavors and the Lucky Few podcasts and all your advocacy and your family. Thank you. Thank you for your voice.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I loved being here.
Heather.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening today. Do us a favor and leave us a review and a rating so that this podcast can get into the ears and the hearts of more and more moms. Did you know that Brave Together podcast is an extension of our nonprofit organization, We Are Brave Together? We Are Brave Together serves an international community of caregiving moms, offering support groups that are virtual and in-person, educational resources, and low-cost weekend retreats. And we have published our first anthology of caregiving stories entitled Becoming Brave Together, Heroic, Extraordinary Caregiving Stories from Mothers Hidden in Plain Sight. It will encourage and validate every parent caregiver. To join us today, go to wearebravetogether.org. Our support and sisterhood awaits you. Brave Together podcast is for entertainment and education purposes only. It's not a substitute for professional care and should not be relied on for medical or mental health advice. The use of any content on our podcast, links, show notes, or on our website is to be done at your own personal risk. Please seek out a professional to assess your own medical or mental health concerns, because we are all beautifully complex and the content of this podcast is for a broad audience.